Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets fall at home against the Indiana Pacers, but in the process, we get a look at a lot of young rotations for the Nets, and also one heck of a performance from Day'Ron Sharpe. We dive in on it all coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms and let you know that you can win big from upsets to game-winning drives all season long into the NFL playoffs with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. And Doug, where we get started is the 113-99 home loss for the Brooklyn Nets against the Indiana Pacers. And we are officially entering the no surprises here territory. When you look at the schedule, when you look at the roster, the injuries, the rotations, we're going to get a lot of games that feel very similar to this going forward.
It's these kind of lineups that when we talked over the summer about tanking, like this is kind of what we pictured. Is like Nets fans really weren't going to be able to grasp like sort of what kinds of lineups might get thrown out there, because when it's the beginning of the season, it's Keon Johnson, it's Dorian Finney-Smith, it's Dennis Schroeder, it's all these guys, Cam Thomas, obviously, all these guys that like can actually play basketball and have had careers or whatever. And what we cautioned against was this idea that it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much for these guys to sort of disappear, because what's going to be behind them is going to be lineups like Keon Johnson, Tyrese Martin, Noah Clowney, Ziaire Williams, and Nic Claxton starting against the Pacers.
Our lineup.
Forget about who's coming in off the bench. Like this is who's going to be. This is actually
like a two-deep rotation.
Well, this is our best foot forward lineup. Like this is the best lineup we have. Maybe Jalen Wilson could be out there instead of someone, but otherwise, it's not like there was too many options left on the bench. And these are what tanking seasons look like. And we'll get into the game here, but on a high level, this is sort of why we thought at times, 20 wins wasn't in super duper jeopardy, because you get a little injured and your motivation gets a little wonky. And all of a sudden you get what we saw kind of happening over the last two games against the Sixers and the Pacers, where they just effectively been blown out.
Yeah, and then you mentioned that the 76ers game as well, right? Because now we're getting into this sample size, and it's been hard over the start of the season to fully have that crystallize because you've had these veterans. But then you remove Dennis Schroeder, right? Now you remove Dorian Finney-Smith. Now, even though we expect more trades to come around Cam Johnson, you just remove guys from injury, and that's actually one of the things that I think you always consistently pointed out over the offseason of, it's not just about the talent level. It's that also you're just going to lose games to injuries. All of these guys, and the Nets have some players on the roster that are prone to miss a handful of games no matter what. So I think a lot of times when you talk about, you look on paper, this team could win basketball. Of course, well, yes, they can win basketball games, and they've proven that, by the way. Like they've won a lot of games to start this year that we were surprised by in many ways. But no one ever thinks about, but what about that Monday night in January when 5 guys are down on the injury report and you've taken away 2 players from trades, and now you're talking about, listen, you go inside the box score. I'm not going to get into the game just yet even, but guys played well. Like all these guys played well. Sure. They put together, had some great sequences. It knocked down some shots, some of the percentages. It all adds up when you look at it in the box score, but it does come down to the totality of the talent and going up against a quality NBA team that has experienced career starters that can put up big numbers, and it's just never going to quite add up. The margins are always going to be a little bit wide, and you're going to, I think, find yourself doing what we'll do today, which is, look, individual performances look pretty nice here, right? What did this player accomplish for themselves? How do we think that can go over the rest of this season, as opposed to looking at the high level from a game perspective? Yeah, the Nets made a run in this. They closed it down to 10, under 10 in the third. They got it back down somewhat-ish at the start of the fourth, and then you fade. And I don't think anyone sat there thinking, wait for the 20-5 run from Brooklyn here that's going to get them back in this game.
No. I mean, with the injury thing too, like just having projected like every team every night for the last decade, basically, you just know this happens, right? Like, and you sometimes just see the drop-offs quicker on some rosters than others, right? Like,
I'm sure predicting minutes for a game like this was super easy for anybody.
Actually, it wasn't. Frankly, this one wasn't too hard because the Nets really had very few rotation guys. This one, I think I was actually playing pretty. I actually think I was probably pretty close on this one. This is what I projected to be the starting lineup, and Wilson had a lot of minutes. Like maybe, yeah, I think I should probably look back. I think I probably almost nailed this. But this one wasn't that hard because sometimes there's just only so many options. But one sort of mental map you can draw for yourself when you look at a game, to look at the Pacers and Nets game is say to yourself, well, one, you can just look at the point spread, right? It was like they get close to like 10.5 or something like that. So you know that they were big time dogs at home, which is like unheard of at home, right? That to be like something like double digit underdogs at home means your team completely stinks. But also just look at the starting lineups for these teams and just say to yourself, which one of the starting five of the Nets would start for this Pacers team? And you'd say none of them. Yeah. So it's basically five. If you made a team of starters between the Pacers and Nets last night, all the starters would be Pacers. And that would be the way that would.
But Brooklyn could provide one of the strongest benches for the Pacers with their starting lineup, which is nice.
You probably do most of those guys Pacers too. So if you do, it wouldn't be all Pacers at that point, but it would be mostly Pacers, which is to say losing by 14 to that situation is actually sort of commendable, right?
Yes,
Because if you, I hate to go player by player because I think that's usually just the wrong way to go, which is like, oh, this guy versus this guy, this guy versus this guy. Oh, the Nets win 3-2 or something like that. I think those are sort of flawed because if one of those guys is Jokic or something, like it just doesn't really add up. But overall, if you just look at it from a high level, the way we just did and break it down, losing by 14 when you probably don't have the top 6 guys or something like that on a team, maybe one of these guys flits into the top 6. That is commendable. And I do think there's one part of this Nets season that's rang true since it started is that even when they get their effort is always high. Like if you watch this game, the effort is really high. I mean, all on ball defense, which is usually a good sort of just holistic or certainly heuristic view of what's happening. It's like, oh, these guys are on ball. They're trying, right? Like team defense are trying to buy in. Day'Ron Sharpe is all over the offensive rebound, offensive glass. That's a high effort kind of thing. Like there is an effort here. It's just that they're so undermanned when it comes to talent. I just have no talent at all. And I think that's kind of what we're going to be seeing probably in the short term, maybe the rest of the season, honestly, the way that things are tracking.
And it's going to be interesting too, because this is, and we'll talk about this into the weeks to come, I think, and through the deadline of how do players continue to respond to it, right? Because at a certain point, this is going to become the norm, being double-digit dogs, walking in the door, playing your butt off, doing all the little things, effort, energy, hustle, heart, all the good stuff. And then still in the fourth quarters being down by double digits and watching it fade a little bit. So this will, it's an opportunity probably for Jordi Fernandez to prove that his methodology and his approach to coaching and getting the most out of players every single night is going to be a repeatable process as you're losing 5 games in a row, 6 games in a row, 7 games out of 10, right? So that's a little bit further down the line here. In the short term, the Nets now lose their second game kind of in blowout fashion here, 113-99 to the Pacers. Coming back on the other side, though, what were the individual performances? Because as weird as maybe this lineup looked like on paper, they did some good things. And we'll get into those stats here coming up in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel. Big upsets to game-winning drives. NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. You like to hear that. FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, so much more. If you head on over to FanDuel right now, you can take a look at the upcoming weekend playoff action. I like the Chargers minus 2.5 on the road against the Texans. Texans looking rough at the end of the season. So take that one. Make that one your $5. Just get started easy. There's no way that Stroud's going to be able to hold up there against my boy Jim Harbaugh. I'm just kind of talking on my butt now. But anyway.
I knew it was off the rails with my bud Jim Harbaugh.
No, look, FanDuel's got all this stuff. You get in the same games, get it in the parlays, get it on the props. All of it has you going. And you can get going with $5 that you can turn into $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the Nets 113-99, loss here to the Indiana Pacers. And you go inside the starting lineup, we said, not one that you would probably put on paper for the Brooklyn Nets. Williams, Clowney, Claxton, Martin, Johnson. That backcourt, a tandem that we obviously knew we would see here. But you get 4 scorers in double digits. It's funny because, again, this is the old, you can't just go by the box score because Ziaire Williams goes 4 of 8 from the field, 2 of 5 from beyond the arc. Clowney, unfortunately, we talked about this previously, where the volume is so heavily skewed on the side of three-point shots here. 10 out of his 15 shots from the field come from deep. He goes 3 of 10. And then Keon Johnson, 32 minutes from that backcourt position, gave you 5 assists, 4 steals in this game. Like, he was doing some things defensively. 12-point performance for him before we even get into the bench. Anything, I mean, and then say nothing of Tyrese Martin, by the way, who at a minimum has proven that he's capable of playing at an NBA level this season. And I think that was very much the question mark is this guy someone you could stick on your bench and have be a rotational player at the back end of it? Yeah. He could be on your bench somewhere down the line, no matter what happens with this roster. Who jumped out to you in the starting 5?
Real quick, I was taking a look at my minutes from last night. I completely crushed this. Reese Beekman, 15 minutes. Tosan and Boyman, 19 minutes. I mean, this is really close. By the way, I was going to say before too, if you're playing,
did you have Iwoma going for those minutes off the bench though? That's what really matters here.
No, I didn't have that. Oh yeah, no, I just said that I had him 24. I had him at 19 minutes. Anyway, so that's neither here nor there. So, although if Beekman and Boyman are playing 42 minutes, you know where you kind of are. I think that one thing I do still like, and I was going to say about the effort piece. The effort part makes sense that it's going to track the rest of the season, because when you look just at where all these guys stand in terms of contracts, like there's no incentive for them to take a lot of these guys to take their feet off the gas. Like they have to keep playing very, very hard, even if it's in losing efforts every night. You're not looking at situations where I'm going to throw a couple guys under the bus here, but it's not going to be totally correct, but it's just going to illustrate a point. When you look at some of these teams that have tanked in the past, like Detroit, like Charlotte, right? At times where you have LaMelo, you have Cade. Cade's been awesome this year, but it's like the incentives for those guys are different, right? Because they're going to be probably franchise players no matter what happens and no matter what they do on a night-to-night basis, because they were picked high in the draft and they have a lot of equity. There's a lot of draft equity in there and they just are good, right? And so the incentives get a little misplaced when it comes to everyone else. The Nets are going to don't have that. Like everyone basically except for Claxton is playing for their next contract on this team right now. So I think that from an effort standpoint, you're not going to see a dip in effort going forward, because that would just mean most of these guys would get, if that dipped, you would just get taken out of the starting lineup and then forget another contract. And because they'll just put someone else in. Put someone else in that's trying. So I think from that standpoint, I think we're going to see it track most of the season. I really still like Ziaire Williams. I really wish the 3-point shooting hadn't dropped off as much as it has. Like it's back down to basically around his career averages, because I think he just does everything else pretty well. And that's a guy that if the 3-point shooting could just get up to like 36% or something like that, he would be a real asset. I think he already is. It's just that he just doesn't shoot quite well enough. So he kind of stands out to me on the game-to-game basis, just like from the eye test standpoint. Defensively, he tracks guys into the lane. He contests he basically contests everything. He makes it super hard on opposing ball handlers. If he's guarding you on the wing, you're kind of in trouble. So he's a guy that I continue to kind of watch and just kind of hope the 3-point shooting comes around. The rest of these guys, I do think there's probably enough bounce with Tyrese Martin that he could turn into something. I'm just not totally sure. And so it's hard to make grand statements about any of these players, because I think we kind of know what we're looking at. But I also am holding out some hope that there's some low-level rotation aspects to a couple of these dudes going into next season or something like that.
Yeah, and a 10-8-4 line for Ziaire in this game as well. 8 rebounds and 4 assists to go along with his 10 points in this game. And you mentioned, and listen, the season's long, so hopefully more consistency for some of these guys, even like Ziaire, gives him an opportunity maybe to round that 3-point shooting into form. And then you mentioned Tyrese. I think it's something for whatever the Nets have not had at certain positions, or just guys coming off the bench, there's something to the eye test for Martin to me that I'm like, oh, he just comes in, he looks comfortable. Like he looks like he fits on the NBA court, right? And we've seen this in the past. There are guys that play minutes for the Brooklyn Nets going back over the years where you look and go, okay, but when is everyone going to be healthy? Or okay, but next year he's not going to be part of this rotation. He's not going to be coming off the bench. So it's been a positive for him there as well. The other thing to me in these,
can I make one set? Wait, can I say one thing about Tyrese Martin too, which makes a little sense with him? Unless you were going to talk about someone, or you're going to move on to someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So real quick with him, it makes a little more sense when you think about Martin, that like the comfort level, and I would say there's like a certain smoothness to his game, but it also tracks with he's like 25 years old. Right. And so he's been around long enough to matured enough that can kind of, but you also can know, oh, well, you're 25. and kind of barely latching on, then what are we really talking about here, right? So there's still this push and pull around, yeah, maybe, but also if it was going to happen, it usually happens before you're 25. so anyway, you can move on to the next guy, but I just wanted to point out, like, the age becomes a factor with some of these guys too.
No, it is true, right? Like, there's obviously the cutoff of when do we have what we have here. You also mentioned, just from a contract standpoint, because it is worth noting, Ziaire is in a contract year for himself. We know Day'Ron is in a contract year. We know that even though Keon Johnson has another year after this on his contract, it's still kind of, this is also prove it territory for him if he wants to have a more substantial career going forward for himself after being a first-round pick. Jalen Wilson, one more year after this. And then it's Tyrese Martin. It's Beekman, and then it's Tosan as well, who, in all of these trades that have happened now with the two veterans going out for Brooklyn, this is something that you don't care as much about right now as we have in years past, where it's, hey, give me somebody young that we can get a look at here. But the Nets also did that while getting more draft picks for the future, a lot more seconds, obviously, in Dennis Schroeder and in Dorian Finney-Smith deals. But they also just got back younger bodies in the door. And now, at first you think, oh, yeah, okay, great, we'll see what happens. We got Lewis back from LA as well. But you turn around and you just see this slew of injuries, and you also think about at least one more trade coming for Brooklyn. You go, yeah, these guys are going to play. And so it does still remind me of the last two seasons where we said, take a shot, take a flyer on three young guys in the offseason, hope that one of them latches on. We're doing it again. We think Ziaire can maybe be that guy. I'll take flyers on any young players, and unlike other teams and situations, these guys are going to get maximum minutes. Tosan is going to play 24 minutes on a Monday night against the Pacers. That's the way it's going to go. So opportunities for these guys are certainly going to come here. And I think Jordi Fernandez has already proven, if you have a good game, it means you get more playing time. It's not a nice pop off there, we'll see in 3 weeks. It's consistency of what your role can be if you're producing night in and night out.
Yeah, I think that, and again, this is something we're going to see the rest of the season. I think that it's just going to be, and by the way, you think this is the end of the names? No way. I mean, Tosan's on a two-way contract. These can sometimes these guys can just also kind of come and go as the season goes on too. We're going to see some 10-day contracts in here after the trade deadline. I'm positive we're going to see we're going to see a revolving door. A lot of Nets fans haven't walked through a season like this where losing is the prerogative. This is what happens later. Is it gets way uglier than this.
Yeah, This is like tip of the iceberg of how much and how long this process is going to be now over the next 50 games. Right?
I'm telling you right now, wait till these 10 days start coming in. Wait till they just get a revolving door through Long Island. Wait till the trade deadline's over and most of the talent's gone, an injury or two. It's not. This is going to be more like the norm. I'm telling you, it's just going to be. That's a hard way to look at it. I know Cam Thomas is hurt and CJ's hurt and Russ D'Lo's hurt and all these guys, and these guys will come back and there will be. It's not like they're done for the season. I'm just saying, in the aggregate, this like what we saw against the Pacers last night is kind of more when you want to tank. This is a lot more what it looks like. And they paid lip service to the vets, but these guys are headed out the door. And once they're not getting replaced. I mean, the D'Lo thing was actually even kind of weird. That fact that they did that. So they even kind of went off script a little bit, even with that. But in general, prepare yourselves, folks. This is going to be, I'd almost guarantee this is not the weirdest starting lineup we see this year.
Coming up here in a second, Day'Ron Sharpe, his big performance on class, and whether or not my suspicion that some teams will at least call about the trade deadline have a little bit of juice to it now. We'll dive into that coming up next.
All right, before we get to that, I'll tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Basketball season heating up. No better way to get real money action while watching your favorite NBA stars than with Prize Picks. Maybe you're a diehard fan. Maybe you just love some friendly competition. Prize Picks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. It's so easy how it works. You pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Maybe you go over to the Prize Picks right now and you think Nikola Jokic is going to be more than 50.5 points plus rebounds plus assists against the Celtics tonight. It's a 10 o'clock game. I like that one, actually. Not bad. I think he plays all the minutes. It's kind of a win in Denver. You want to go more on the 50.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. You can do that with our friends over at Prize Picks. You just make one more pick and you're good to go. You can use Prize Picks all season long. It's the perfect time to join. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get that bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right, so to tie a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, losers 113-99 to the Indiana Pacers at home. I believe that makes 6 straight home losses for Brooklyn as well. It's one of the things that I kept putting it, like, I was like, oh, silver lining too. They're going to have a losing record this year, but they were doing a decent job on their home floor, which I always think is a good thing. Reward your home fans. If you're going to get a couple of wins, a couple of upsets, do it at home so your fans get to watch and enjoy that. That's also going by the wayside, just so everybody's aware. Quick little footnote too. Man by the name of Dariq Whitehead made an appearance in this game. He played 3 minutes, knocked down a triple. I don't know, for whatever that's worth. We're all pulling for the kid. Hopefully he sees some more minutes as we move along here. One of the few young guys that did not see significant run here. But Day'Ron Sharpe, 22 minutes of action, 8 of 13 from the field, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, 16-point performance for him. Said after the game, basically, I don't care. I don't care how big you are. I don't care how much weight you got. Get out of my way. I grab boards. Guys always had that mentality, and I appreciate it. There's nothing new for Day'Ron Sharpe, although he had, I think it was in like the third quarter, he had a great offensive rebound, took it to the baseline, and then gave a bounce pass to a cutting Noah Clowney. And I just, in my bingo card of sequences I was going to see from the Brooklyn Nets, it was not kind of no-look bounce pass from Day'Ron Sharpe to Noah Clowney for a flush. I'm so curious to see what happens with Day'Ron here. Like, I think that the Nets like him. I think they want to keep him. It's such a lower level version of the Cam Thomas conversation, but I still think it is one because it's the guy that could never quite find a role with this team. And now even in this moment, look at the lineup you threw out there. Could you have thrown Day'Ron to the starting lineup tonight, just even symbolically? You probably could have, but instead he's that bench guy. And I'm always curious about what comes next for him as he's on that expiring contract.
They have played, it might have only been for like 4 minutes or maybe even less. They did play him and Claxton together earlier this season, maybe like 3 games ago. So, I mean, they've done
it.
If
you're going to play Claxton and Ben Simmons, you might as well play Day'Ron Sharpe and Claxton.
I should look that up real quick, how many minutes they played. I bet you it's like 4. But the overall, yeah, he's a weird one because, again, we've said many times, we don't really know where the Nets stand with him. They have not really, in classic Nets fashion, you just don't know where they stand with any of these guys. And it just seems like this is, unless you're Mikal Bridges, and then they even traded him. So, like, unless you're him, it's like you never need exactly.
Unless you're someone the team is fully committed to, like Mikal Bridges, who they did immediately end up trading for a haul of picks.
Yeah, so it's just like you just can't ever get a handle on where they stand with some of these guys. We've seen it so many times. I mean, honestly, from back to even like Kyrie, like you just don't ever know how they feel about the guys. Cam Thomas is the perfect example. Day'Ron's at a lower level than that, but it speaks to the same problem: is that the minutes have been in the past inconsistent, are consistent now, but they have no one else. So It's like, so you have to kind of play him now, you think, but they could have had to feel like they had to play him last year and they just kind of didn't. When he gets out there, we already know he's among the best, pound for pound rebounders in the whole game. Like, he just has a nose for the ball. It's first off the glass. It's for sure a skill of his. Per minute, I think he's top 5 or something like that this season. He's been top 5 basically since he entered the NBA. He does other things not as well. Like his ball, he's just like, his ball awareness is not great. His hands are not great. And that's a problem, right? If you're trying to think about becoming the pick and roll sort of center, he is a good screen setter, but he does make silly fouls on that end also. So I just kind of never know when to stand. But then he has this one thing that pops off the page of you, which is the rebounding. And you're like, oh, that's like the super high effort for sure skill.
Yeah.
And of all the skills, it's like the one that I sometimes value the least on a counting stat basis, because we just seen a lot of like high volume rebounders,
of course,
that just can't like necessarily play like a lot of minutes in like a really good team's rotation. I'm not knocking him. I'm just saying that's the one stat where I sometimes think it just doesn't always translate to being like awesome. Right. Yeah. And so I don't know. It sounds like I'm damning with faint praise, I guess, but I don't mean to do that. But I can understand why it's sometimes hard to evaluate him.
Well, as I think, like with so many of these guys that are, I mean, even Cam Thomas, again, different conversation completely. But okay, in this offseason, will you pay him? Yeah, probably. We'll have the money. What's the difference, right? I mean, Ziaire Williams, I mean, it's almost probably the same thing. These guys are going to tier out at far different financial brackets. We go, oh, would you bring back Ziaire Williams? Yeah, probably. Why? Why not? We got the money. Like, we're gonna have the ability to spend it. Why wouldn't we keep one of these guys around? And Day'Ron is a draft pick, obviously, and maybe it's just been that the Nets have gone through these different iterations of their team, and what the expectations were and the goals were. But in none of those iterations have we seen Day'Ron Sharpe be a particularly integral part of it, even coming off the bench. More consistent minutes now. Hopefully we see that going forward here. And I think really that's always my curiosity as you look towards the deadline, just under a month from now. Oh, will a team call and say, we'll give you a couple second-round picks for Day'Ron Sharpe because he'll grab a bunch of boards and he can play around the basket on both ends of the court? I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
My suspicion would be no. My default would be no. Mostly if we're talking about the salary, I guess it's a little bit different when we think about these other moves the Nets have made, because saying 3 second round picks for Dorian Finney-Smith. Well, first of all, two very different players. Also, salary matching with D'Angelo Russell, right? Also, you put Maxwell Lewis into the mix there too. I don't know if anybody would look at it and say there is draft asset value to Day'Ron Sharpe, knowing you don't really have to do anything in order to make salaries match. Maybe it's the only scenario I see is you attach him into a deal as kind of the little bonus here, right? Cameron Johnson's going somewhere, and that team needs some rebounding as well. Hey, we do have a player in Day'Ron Sharpe. If it gets us across the line on something extra, a player we like, maybe something like that. But to your point, I just don't know if that is sweetening a deal or if it's just a body. And at this point, the Nets would be just as likely to hold on to him and see what he develops into. So I just find it interesting. And more than anything, I'd like to see him be playing more consistent minutes. And honestly, my last note on him is I kept looking at him in a far different light than Nic Claxton because they have a very different skill set on the court. I always thought that coming out, they said slow and steady, you will see the perimeter shot develop for him to whatever degree. We didn't see any of that volume last night. We saw 13 shots from the field, not a single one from beyond the arc, right? So the Nets continue to be a team that has a hard time finding a man that can rebound the basketball, that can maybe play some defense, and can also help stretch the court. They have yet to be able to identify a young player like that to put into their core, something they're going to need to do no matter what direction they go moving forward.
I mean, to be fair about that, like if you're that, then you're awesome. So
I just mean being a guy that can stretch the floor from the five. I don't mean everything put together here. I don't mean Nic Claxton needs to be 30 pounds heavier and also be able to knock down 34% from beyond the arc. I just mean even having that one player that does that. The Brooklyn Nets have not have a guy that plays at the five that shoots the three. That has not existed.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Unless they went on small ball lines with Dorian Finney-Smith, sure. We thought that is Noah Clowney going to be that? Well, no, Noah Clowney's not going to be not a five at all at the NBA level. That's not a knock on him, right? That's probably a good thing for him. But they've never drafted or brought in that player. And year over year, no matter what the iteration of this team has been, they've always needed that. They've needed a big that could shoot, and they've never had that in any iteration of this roster.
I agree with you, and I know you caveated it, and I'm also still going to throw out that player, there aren't like tons of that guy. Like that's my only point. It's like that. It's hard to knock them for not getting that guy. Most teams don't have that guy, and if they do have that guy, the guy's like Jokic or something like that. And I know there's other examples. Vooch can shoot threes, and there's other bigs. There's other bigs that can do it. Right, like Brook Lopez. And those guys are just like the centers on championship level teams. I do agree with
Al Horford. Yeah. By the way, it's a good exercise because the more you name them, is the more you go right on a championship team, like right on a high level. Right,
it's like, okay, now we win. We're one of the best teams in the league, and Evan Mobley, or I guess he's a 4. Jared Allen. If you look at teams, we'll close on this. I think if you look at teams that sort of suffer from a rebounding disadvantage, most of them are not very good. And most of them kind of have a guy that they can probably tell themselves is a backup center anyway. And I just don't think you're like trading for a body and rebounds at this point. Go ahead.
Can I, by the way, just very quickly, I had an appearance with Andy Kamenetsky out in LA they were asking about Dorian Finney-Smith.
Yeah,
they were specifically asking about, we see a lot that he played at the 4 and even up at the 5 at times. Is that because he can only do certain things defensively, or is he more versatile? I was like, well, hold on. I was like, you gotta remember, always look at this through the Brooklyn Nets prism. I was like, the Nets didn't have anybody to play at the 5, and that's where you enter Dorian Finney-Smith. So there was, I shouldn't sell the Nets short. They did have a big stretch where when they played Dorian Finney-Smith at small ball 5, he could crush that triple. You know what I mean? So that's sometimes you have to go with a different formula to get the job done. But I thought it was just funny to put it in context where he's going to play in LA versus where any player plays in Brooklyn because they've been such a hodgepodge these last couple of seasons.
Yeah, it's not a good way to figure out sort of like what your team is going to do. Usually, I don't think. That's just us. Okay, we are going to get out of here. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you listen to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe over on YouTube as well. Locked On Nets wherever you listen.
What's the matter, Colonel Sanders? Chicken. That
one
is Dark Helmet.
Yeah, it is one of the all-time great poets. Ludicrous speed, baby. We'll be back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.